Good to be with everybody. Um, and Mark and I were speaking just when we came on just a few minutes ago that it's hard to um, find sort of an on-ramp in a way. I mean, it's Purim for many of us. It might be hard to get into a Purim state of mind, although maybe it's an opportunity. It's Erev Purim, I should say. It's Ta'anit Esther. We're coming towards Purim. It can be hard to get into a Purim state of mind given the fullness of our challenges nationally, internationally, and so on. Um, Although maybe there's an opportunity to redefine what it is to be in a Purim state of mind. So I think in some ways that's what I'll try to do in this little window here as we get ready to sit together. In some ways, I think Purim is about um, it's not different than the rest of our lives. It's about one way that you could describe it is Purim invites us to look more closely at what our tradition calls the Yetzer Hara, which is translated most often as the evil inclination. The translation that I prefer is the impulse towards self-absorption. But so this is the stuff that I think is part of any spiritual life. I guess you could also redefine it as like working with the shadow, or working with those things that we usually keep at arm's length, the uncomfortable emotions, kind of the darker places. And I think Purim invites us to sort of sit in the presence of what we usually call those darker, more uncomfortable emotions. And to change our way of relating to them and really almost by any means necessary, right? And that's sort of the wildness that Purim is associated with, but it's really deeply theologically interesting as a holiday. I think I think like many of us, I didn't have an intuitive relationship to the Yetzer Hara. Um, it's to me, it just too easily conjured up images of like the cartoon devil on the shoulder, the way that the rabbinic tradition talks about the Yetzer Hara is very much as, it's very dualistic way of thinking about things as something that some bad part of ourselves that's impacting us in a certain way and that we have to learn to have control over. So none of that really appealed to me so much. I heard a talk, this began to change when I heard a talk that Rabbi Jeff Roth gave years and years ago, where he said, okay, this is what the Yetzer Hara is. He said, imagine that you are at a restaurant and you are sitting down with a beloved friend or partner, and the person who's waiting on you brings out just bowls of delicious soup, and you're just that right amount of hungry. You just smell it. You're moving slow. You're appreciating the company. You take, a spoonful of the soup. It's even more delicious than you could have imagined. And you take another, and you're just in such a sweet place of enjoying this soup. And then at a certain point, you start to think, I wonder if I could get the recipe for this soup. And that's the Yetzer Hara. It's that graspy moment, right? Jeff gave another example of being on vacation, and just in a beautiful part of the world and loving it and relaxed. And you're there the first day, the second day, and then on the third day, you start thinking, "Oh, I wonder if there's any property that's available here. I wonder if I could come here more often." And he's like, "That's the Yetzer Hara." So that helped me begin to sort of think about the Yetzer Hara as this graspy part of ourselves, right? That wants to keep experiences, very natural, but often it's another way of naming the impulse towards self-absorption. So what are the strategies for dealing with the Yetzer Hara? In Purim, we might kind of, like I said, we sort of are invited to allow it to come into our presence and trust that our practice is strong enough that we can do it. And Kalanimus Kalman Shapira, the Rebbe of the Warsaw Ghetto, brings a teaching that he says, actually, the Yetzer Hara, we talk it up and it begins to seem like this really fearsome thing, but when you actually come into its presence, like maybe Purim invites us to do, he says it's actually like a worn out bandit who's just sitting by the side of the road, coasting on his reputation as being fearsome, but actually not that fearsome. So I really like that image, and it feels much more helpful to me than just the endless pushing away of whatever we call. Think of the Yetzer Hara as whatever we call that kind of stuff that we don't want to go there, and all the energy that it takes to keep that stuff at bay. So when you put it like this, you really see this is what we're doing in our practice, right? As our sitting practice, we're trying to, with compassion and with noticing and with gentleness, turn towards what is here, both kind of behind the eyelids, happening inside of us, and also outside of the eyelids, right? Like on the other side, in the world, the phenomenal world. So this is our work. And I'll say one last thing uh, that has helped me, and Rabbi Ira Stone and Beulah Trey, two of my teachers at the Center for Contemporary Musar, at a certain point they said, there's not a Yetzer Hara, evil inclination, and a Yetzer HaTov, good inclination, or if you like, impulse towards self-absorption, impulse towards the other, and curiosity being of service. They said there's only one Yetzer, right? There's only one creative force that moves through us, that animates us. And when we're tight and constricted, that force manifests as Ra, toward like not good. And when we're more semi-permeable, able to, you know, be present, to be available, that Yetzer manifests as Tov, as goodness. So, and that's very much a Purim teaching, that there's not a duality, despite, Judaism is a non-dual tradition hiding inside a dualistic tradition. There's one Yetzer, not two, but we do have the responsibility to, as best we're able, to have a practice that helps us be semi-permeable so that Yetzer, more often than not, can be expressed towards the benefit of all beings. So as we go into the silence now, really whatever works, first of all, we'll always say that, whatever your practice is, those places that are true and those helpful ways of entering into the silence, the stillness, just do that. One way, if you want to play with any of this imagery, is just to think about that metaphor of semi-permeability, to think of this creative force that mysteriously animates each of us, and to think about it like, okay, we're sort of to the degree that we have any control, how can we be vessels with the right amount of, again, the word semi-permeability, so that this creative force can come through us in a way where godliness can come into the world and we can be helpful and we can be at peace, we can be calm. And you can notice the places where you get tight, where we kind of stop the force in a way, or it feels like that, and just have compassion on yourself at those moments and just steadily see if we can kind of loosen, unclench around that. So if that's helpful to play with that metaphor of semi-permeability in relation to the Yetzer, you could do that as well. So we'll sit for a little under 15 minutes, and then we'll come out and have a chance for a mourner's Kaddish and some concluding words. May any knowing that has come to us or any insight or any harvest from this silent time sitting together, may anything that we have been blessed to receive be for the benefit of all beings everywhere. May it inform us as we go into our days and into encounters and relationships and connections, and may it ripple out and may it truly be for the benefit of all beings. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you so much, Rabbi Joshua Boettiger, for this profound teaching and holding us in this space in the beautiful bracha, beautiful blessing. Friends, let's seal the practice by offering an opportunity for anyone here who's in mourning, observing a yard site, or for whom it's your custom to join in the mourner's Kaddish to do so. Please, if you're not reciting Kaddish, please stay present for a few moments to support those who are. And if you're joining us for Kaddish, you can put the name or names of those who are honoring in the chat now or afterwards. And if you are joining me, please rise in body or in spirit, and you can unmute this time. Buchdahl, Yitadash, Shemei
Shemei
Rabba,
Rabba,
Divrach, Yute,
Aman,
Yif,
Ivrei,
Malchute,
Yurte,
Hayekon,
Biakte,
Hayekon,
Hayakon,
Hayet, Kol Beit
Yisrael,
Israel,
Uchaye,
Yalla,
Becho Beit Israel, La Bizman Karim Vimmer, Amen.
Rabban
Yehi
Barach,
Shmei Leolam, Nevorach, Olam,
Barach,
Hamayach, Bivarach, Bisharach, Biyitziv, Ha'ar,
Adar,
Biyishma,
Yitalev,
Maseh, Hadar, V'Yihalel, V'Yihalam,
Ve'ila,
Shmei,
Mikol
V'Kudashah,
Birchata V'Shirata,
Le'ela,
Uprata
V'Shir
V'Nechama,
Kush,
Ta'amiram,
Tata
Ka'olam,
V'Nechama, Amiram Dialma,
Shlama Rabba
Shmei, No Rabamim Shemayim, Hayim Aleinu V'Yoko Yisrael V'Imru, Amen. Aseh Shalom V'Ramav, Huya Aseh Shalom, Aleinu V'Yoko Yisrael V'Yoko Yoshvei Tevel V'Imru, Amen.
Amen. May all those who are in mourning or observing yard site, may you be comforted among all those who mourn. And I want to thank everyone for being here today. Thank Rachel Hugot for holding our tech space, for leaving us now. We hope you'll join us tomorrow on Purim Day. We'll be led by Rabbi Susan Leiter tomorrow, and we hope you'll join us then. You're invited, if you'd like, to just continue to sit in stillness, in silence. You can turn off the sound on your device and just use the support of our community to hold you while you continue to sit. You can join us also for a conversation. And if you have a question you'd like to ask, you can put that in the chat. Just write question all in caps. I'll try to work your question into the conversation. Thanks for the beautiful blessings in the chat that I'm seeing. Joshua, thank you so much for that really profound teaching. I felt like I was wanted to sing in the choir there. And there were so many gems. I wanted to start with one thing you said, which, and I want to talk about how the connection between this meditation practice and these concepts. So you said Judaism is a non-dual, I'm paraphrasing a little bit, I think. Judaism is a non-dualistic tradition hiding behind a dualistic something. You were saying that in regard to the Yetzer, just now I'm just going to reflect back what I heard and restate it, maybe just for clarity, that in Jewish tradition, we have this idea of the Yetzer Tov, the so-called good inclination, the Yetzer Hara, the so-called evil inclination. And you were saying that, yes, we have those categories, but actually there's just Yetzer, a Hebrew word, which is the root of which connotes formation, right? It's the formational energy that enlivens us. And this is now my take on my riff on what you're saying. and that depending on how we as human beings direct that energy, it can go, in those different directions towards the sacred and the holy and the wholesome, or towards self-centered ends, right? So my experience sitting today was of, first of all, being freed up from the obligation or the opportunity to speak. So number one, or to do anything. I'm just sitting here. And so I'm growing in my own awareness of this formational energy that is flowing through me that I can experience in my body and my breath, etc. So it's just a moment for me to experience that non-dual aspect of Yetzer as you were describing it. So I want to start there. Like that was my experience for meditation practice. And then of course I did have my mind was active, and I was thinking, well, at the very least, we took 193 people out of the possibility of saying or doing of doing some harm, right? Everybody was sitting, breathing, and having their own experience. So it was an opportunity to experience that non-dual aspect of Yetzer energy that I experienced. So I'm just going to invite you to respond to that, I guess.
Mm.
Or
Yeah.
or I can put it into a question, which is, how would you experience, how would you connect that with what we're actually doing while we're sitting in terms of awareness of Yetzer? I'll just add one more thing and that give you a chance to think on that. Those examples you gave from Rabbi Jeff Roth of, I want I'd like the recipe, or I wonder if I can buy some property, which are great, fantastic examples. Um, it's sort of about like this moment when we want to, like you said, grasp onto something and own it. You know, I was thinking about taking photographs also as a way of kind of freezing it. Like I don't want, which has to do with the fear of losing fear of losing it. Oh, it's going to pass. It's impermanent. Vacation's going to be over. The soup is going to be finished. We could frame it as, oh, I'm selfish. I want the recipe, or I want the property. But actually, we can bring compassion to this underlying that desire is actually a fear, which is a natural part of just being human, that it's all going away, right? Which
Yeah.
it always is.
Yeah. Well, there's not a last name, but Nancy in the chat just said there's energy which we have the agency to direct. And
Right.
I like that because on one level, we can sit, and this could be one way of approaching it. Like on one level, we sit, and that formative energy that I liked how you define that, the Yetzer, that's not good or bad, comes through us. And I think
Hmm.
there's something to be said for just allowing that, right? Like
Hmm.
not trying to manage it or to manipulate it or to think too hard about it. I
Hmm.
think there's some kind of trust, like that, like we are a channel somehow as human beings,
Hmm. Hmm.
and yet, I mean, Nancy's right. And because we're human beings, we are not, we're not like these pure, clear vessels. And so we are going to have choices to make in terms of our own particular, I guess, what we do with this energy. And
Right.
sometimes those we're going to make choices that are less skillful than others. And I think that's just what it is to be a human being. And so I think it makes sense, I guess, to go back to the first thing you said, we're a non-dual tradition. There is just this Yetzer. There's
Hmm.
not different Yetzers, but the choices that we make and the impact of those choices, at least in the phenomenal world that we live in, we would be ducking something if we didn't say they have consequences or there's an impact or we have to, and so I guess it's a non-dual tradition hiding within a dualistic tradition, and it's a dualistic tradition hiding in a non-dual tradition. I mean, I think we need both,
Right.
you know, and I mean, I remember with your thing about photos, like my brother and I spent this incredible winter in living in Isla Holbox in Mexico years ago, like long, long time ago. And we were all on this trip about like, oh, photos are just trying to like capture the. And so we didn't take any pictures in 3 months. And now we just sit around and are like, man, we should have taken some pictures. Like that whole part of our life is just gone. And
Right. Right.
it would have been nice to have some. So, you know.
So let's stay with that for a second, okay? Because I'm thinking about, this tension between non-dual and dualism. We live in a dualistic world, right? This is the world we live in, the material, physical world, right? That's beautiful and broken, right? And at the same time, we have a tradition which says that, underlying that or informing that is this oneness, right? And that connects everything. And that the spiritual practice is really trying to, like you said, hold both. Like, Shabbat, we have Shabbat for the non-dual, and we have the 6 days of the week for the dual, and we try to integrate them and infuse the non-dual, infuse the dual with the non-dual, which is kind of what we're doing. So anyway, that example of the photos is actually pretty, I think, a good one because um, in the instinct to freeze the moment, which is an I ego thing, I don't want to lose this, right? There's actually something beautiful in that. It's not just that oh, that's a selfish,
Mhm.
ego-driven thing,
Right,
right?
right.
When we're younger and we want to be pure, then yeah, no pictures and no whatever. But actually, there's something sweet in it about if it's used for the service of something greater, right? If it's taking the picture so I can sell it or whatever, make $1 million or like, but something about trying to figure out about like, because we cannot escape the I.
Mm-hmm.
The you were just the way you were describing the kind of the Yetzer Hara. What was the phrase you used for the Yetzer Hara? It was really good. It was
The impulse towards self-absorption.
self-absorption, right? Okay,
Yeah.
so we cannot escape the self. We are a self, right? The danger is self-absorption, right? The challenge is how to use the self in service of the selfless, right?
Nice,
Um,
nice.
so like this conversation also is making me think about the piyut, the liturgical poem on Yom Kippur, Kihine Kachomer, which is a beautiful liturgical poem which imagines us as kind of the raw material, right, for the artisan, right? And uses that word Yetzer, and describes God as Yotzer, as the one who
Oh yeah,
forms. And
yeah.
like we sit and we sort of imagine ourselves as, oh, I am being formed as a vessel through which the divine can find its purpose through me, right? And my I, it's not to totally eschew the I, it's just how to use wisely, skillfully engage the I as the vessel for doing that. And that our practice, this meditation practice, can be this opportunity. Like the way you were describing it, I was thinking it was kind of like, oh, we're hitting the reset button here,
Mm-hmm.
because if left
Mm-hmm.
to my own devices, walking around in the world, like the I grows, 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 usually out of anxiety and fear,
Mm-hmm.
or pain, right? Um, and we need this moment to hit the reset and say, oh, wait a minute, it's not about me. Right, it's not about
Mm-hmm.
me, right? So,
Yeah,
go ahead.
yeah, well, I think that, I mean, to bring it to Purim, I think that
Yes.
is why it's actually such a profound holiday because we do have to live in a thank God it's like this we do it's not just that dualism is like a thing we have to get through like yeah it's beautiful like we make choices in our life and it's particular and we're these particular beings and these and I think Purim shows us kind of an underlying unity that's like you don't know if you're blessing Haman or cursing Mordecai. And it's Purim saying actually on the deepest level, it's the same. And then it says the next day, though, go back to your life where it's not the same, but
Mhm.
have that underlying unity continue to inform who you are. like to kind of rest into
Right.
this underlying timelessness. Like I had it's been said, I liked what you said, to use the self in service of the selfless. And I also, there's a phrase I like of like, we are time-bound beings, but through this time-bound being, we experience the timeless,
Yeah.
So I think it's to not make it that like it's bad, this world where we have to be, separate and have all these identities and these distinctions. It's beautiful. I mean, what we're just trying to do is like, take the agency and the responsibility for that formative energy that comes through us and try to make, life-giving choices. I think the problem though is that we're not really dependable in terms of like if I'm feeling that, if I'm trying to be like, oh, this would be a good way of doing it. I mean, I guess that's why we have these traditions of like Judaism is a tradition, like every religious tradition worth its salt, of recognizing the fall down, get up, fall down, get up, like a
Hmm.
forgiveness. And we need it because we aren't reliable narrators. And I think that's the piece. If it was easy, it's easier said than done to make choices with our agency that are life-giving, but it's actually quite a hard thing to do because it's confusing. We have our own fears and our own difficulties that make it hard to make choices that are always clear.
Yeah. Yeah. That's beautiful. Really. Um, let's go back to the Yetzer Hara and Purim, since, um, I mean, every year it's, we revisit this, and there's so many problematic aspects about the Book of Esther that we're going to read tonight and tomorrow. But in terms of what you're describing, the Yetzer Hara, it's just interesting to me when I'm struck that it's a story about the fear of annihilation, right? Fear of being obliterated, and it gets translated eventually into kind of a fantasy of revenge, and um, which is treated or has been treated for a lot of Jewish history as just kind of like a fantasy, right? A parody, right? Um, but in terms of our own inner life, about the relationship between the manifestation of the Yetzer Hara, that is our inner, sometimes I'll describe it as our inner bully, our inner meanness. I have two quotes. One is Springsteen from his Nebraska album, which just got, a lot of publicity from this movie, where he has a line in the title song, Nebraska, which is about this, serial killer who's asked, "Why did you do that?" And he says, "I guess there's just a meanness in this world," um, which relates to the Torah reading from this past Shabbat Zachor, where we read about Amalek, who is the kind of the representation of the Yetzer Hara, right? We're supposed to remember Amalek, who's the bully, who picks on the vulnerable. And we have a beautiful tradition, especially in the mystical tradition, that Amalek is not just an external enemy, but an internal, operates internally, that we all have an inner Amalek also, a bully, who has the tendency to pick on vulnerability, whether it's others, but also sometimes ourselves, right? And to uh, disarm that Amalek, disarm the Yetzer Hara in some way by noticing, what's, I guess I'm going to put this into a question for you. We just have a minute or two left, but um, how do you, in terms of your understanding of Musar practice, right? In terms of when we notice that kind of, the part of ourselves that we would, we don't want to share, we don't want to show, that we might feel shame about, the shadow, as it were, like you said. How do we meet that through practice, through spiritual practice?
Yeah. Well, I love anytime anyone quotes Nebraska, I'm on board. Um, the the
We
Springsteen
we
quote.
like we like the depressing Bruce.
Yeah, exactly. What does that say about us?
Yes, I
Um,
don't
uh, the yeah, I mean, I think Musar has a bad rep. I know we just have a minute. I'll just say
know.
I think
Mm,
Musar
mm,
has a bad reputation for a good reason. in terms of its pre-modern or even more recent than that. Like it's a sort of sense of if you have this inner bully, like you have to tame it, you have to,
Mhm.
it's like really, it's kind of push, it's
Conquer it.
that,
Yeah.
yeah, that kind of energy. And I think a contemporary Musar, I think that's not just not good pastorally. I think it's not good practice, And so I think a
Mhm.
contemporary Musar, whether, practiced at IJS and CCM and other places, like, is one that's more informed by this practice, which kind of you see firsthand, this meditation practice. Like one can see firsthand that it doesn't work, like that bully letting the Yetzer Hara, kind of giving the Yetzer Hara the keys to drive our life, is not a good idea. We should be aware of it and try not to do it as often as we might do. But it's also not good to berate ourselves for doing that, right? It's like this, doing it with honey rather than vinegar, or whatever that
Right.
metaphor
Right.
is. Um, I know there's a lot more to say.
That's
Yeah.
yeah. There was a lot more to say. We'll work on that. But I just want to end by that I love that image of the Yetzer Hara as a broken down. Would you say bandit?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like super villain who turns out to be just washed up. And I guess what it boils down to, what we're talking about, is like seeing that character by the road and saying, "Hey, let's go get a cup of coffee,"
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that can
Totally.
change things.
Mark,
All
I'll
right.
just say I'm
Yep.
sorry that I
Yep.
don't have a resource sheet. I saw some requests for that, but if anyone wants to be in touch with me directly, and I can try to send, I'm happy to send stuff along.
Great. Okay. So maybe Rachel, if you can put back in the chat, if you wouldn't mind, for those who are interested, can the website for the Center for Contemporary Musaf and Musar. I don't, well, we're still waiting for the Center for Contemporary Musaf. Um,
Maybe
uh,
we can start it, Mark. That
we
can
can
be our
start
next
that. Yeah.
project.
Well, I think I know what what it will look like. Um, Wednesdays at 10 a.m. opportunity to practice with Rabbi Joshua and also check out wonderful offerings to the Center for Contemporary Musar. Always a blessing, especially today as we move into
Mm,
a very complicated
yeah.
Purim. So we know that joy is an essential part of response. So we hope people will find some joy in the midst of all the pain, the fear, anxiety, and all the other feelings that might be present. To find a little bit of joy tonight and tomorrow, and we'll be here to share the joy with you tomorrow on Purim. Thanks, Rachel. Thanks, Rabbi Joshua. Thanks each of you for being here. Many blessings, everyone.
Amen. Thanks, Mark.